This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to talk about the best fun used cars that are actually practical. So many fun cars are sports cars, and you can only enjoy them with yourself and one other person, but if you want something fun that you can also enjoy with people, with your family, here's the list. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've sold some fantastic cars recently, including this Mercedes G-Wagon, which brought $65,000, this Maserati Gran Turismo, which sold for just over $42,000, and this wonderful Audi R8 V10 with a gated manual transmission that brought $120,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. With daily auctions and great selection, check it out at carsandbids.com. Okay, so cool cars, cool fun used cars that are actually practical. Like I said, most fun cars are sports cars, but if you want a fun practical car, they exist. Today I'm going to go through my favorites from a variety of price points. This list is alphabetical, and there are cars on here that are unbelievably expensive and cars that are very much affordable. The one thing they have in common is they are all fun and practical. So, starting my list with the Audi RS2. I love my Audi RS2. It may be for sale right now, or it may have just sold, or it may be selling soon, in which case edit that part out. But my RS2 is a fun, practical car. It's got 5 seats and a station wagon back. It's a little small, but it's like the coolest, iconic, awesome first Audi RS car. So many great things. And it's also practical. And same can be said for the BMW E34 M5 Touring, which is a sort of similar situation. The M5 Touring is actually more practical. It was a little bit of a larger car, and it was a high performance, fast, fun, exciting, rare, low production volume wagon, and it totally is cool. Now, both of these cars are expensive. RS2s are now, $80,000 to $100,000 for a nice one. M5 Tourings are at least that much. But they're both like awesome 90s fun performance cars that will get huge crowds at car shows and Cars and Coffee, but that are also family practical. Okay, next up, cars that are practical and fun, used cars. Bentley ARNAGE T. Okay, hear me out. The Bentley ARNAGE was a ridiculous car. It's Bentley's flagship luxury sedan before Volkswagen Group took over, and actually even for a little while after. It was sold from maybe like 98 to like 2010 and 2008. And it was absurd. Big, stately, old school Bentley you were supposed to drive is like a luxury car. Whatever. But the point is they made a high performance version called the ARNAGE T, which had like big power and it looked cool. Those flat 5-spoke wheels. I loved that car. And they're now like 40 grand. And they're unreliable as hell. They'll probably break all the time. I've actually heard anecdotally they're not that bad, but go into it with your eyes wide open. Assume it will be terrible, but also assume it will be so cool. 40 grand buys you like a crappy 5 Series, like a 528i. Or a Bentley ARNAGE T. It was a $300,000 car 15 years ago. It would be so cool, so ballin'. So that's the ARNAGE T. Don't actually do this, but you could, and it is in fact a fun, practical, used car. Okay, next up, fun, practical used cars, especially if you're on an actually legitimate budget, not a Bentley ARNAGE T budget. CADILLAC CTS-V, and I'm not talking about the wagon, although that was a practical fun car. I'm talking about the V1, the original CTS-V, 04 to 07 I think they were made. I owned a black V1. These were so cool. These had the motor from the Chevy Corvette Z06. They were all manual transmission. They looked cool. Like they had these little subtle styling cues, better wheels, ground effects a little bit, but it was kind of subtle. And they were fun to drive, big V8, manual only, cool car, rear wheel drive. And I loved this car. And you can still pick one up for like 15 to 20. They were pretty reliable. Early ones had some differential problems, but those would be solved by now. And they were just cool. They were reliable. Parts are easy to find. The interior is not great. It was in terms of like quality, material quality, but they were reliable. They had space. They had interior space. So if you really wanted to carry around a family in a fun, throw the back out rear wheel drive car, this is that kind of thing. For 15 to 20, this is what I would recommend for most people interested in a performance sedan. The E39 M5 is an awesome car, but it comes with some headaches and it's actually a little tighter inside than you might think. The CTS-V is just cool. Okay, next up, fun used cars that are also practical. Here's maybe the least practical car on this list, the Ferrari 612. Now, again, the price point here, I mean, these are still $100,000 cars, but they were 4-seat Ferraris, new, they were like $350, and it's like a beautiful V12 Ferrari that drives pretty well. I reviewed a 612 that we sold on Cars and Bids maybe 2 years ago, and it's like fun to drive. It's a V12 Ferrari. The handling is fantastic despite the car's size because it's bigger since it has 4 seats. But it handles perfectly. I mean, really, really nicely done. The V12 is amazing. It sounds great. It's very special. Some people don't love how it looks, but I think it's aging pretty well. And I think that is one of the coolest cars you can buy and stick 4 people in. Now, 4 people aren't gonna wanna ride in that car. So like, you don't want to get this if you have kids that are carting them everywhere. But if you like occasionally bring people, or if you have like a dog that you don't mind getting in your supercar, Noodle, he's in there, he just won't reveal himself. Then that's a cool car for you. It's like a little more practical, a supercar that gives you a little bit more space. And it's very cool. Also, with the 612, you got to assume they're not really going to lose much more value. That era of Ferrari was pretty reliable. It started, the mid-2000s started to get into kind of the reliable Ferrari era. 612, I have to assume, is kind of bottomed out at 95 to 100 for like a kind of an early nice one. They've been around there for a long time. They haven't really gotten any cheaper, and I suspect they're not really going to. Okay, next up in terms of cool used cars that are also practical, Ford F-150 Raptor. A new one is cool and practical, but a used one is especially cool. An early Raptor, like a 13 or a 14 with the 6.2 V8, those are $20,000 to $30,000 trucks in a lot of situations. They don't lose value. They have an enormous amount of interior space, and you can do anything with them. You can take them to the drag strip, you can go off-roading, or you can just drive your kids to school if you don't mind a massive truck. They're fun. They're like actually fun and exciting trucks, and they're more practical than people think. I think a lot of people want to avoid trucks like that. Oh, they're made for off-roading. No way. They drive really well. They're luxurious. Yes, fuel economy is a problem, but they keep their value very well, which is very important. And I think those are great trucks to use as family cars, as ridiculous as it says. But if you want something fun and relatively affordable, those are pretty reliable. And family-ish, Raptor. Okay, next up, fun used cars that are actually practical, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. The Woody Grand Wagoneers are so cool. They made them through the 91 model year. The later ones are especially desirable. These are just awesome cars, and they're not fast. Everything else on this list is like fast and fun. This is more just like fun because of the way it feels, the way it looks, the way it kind of brings you back to a different time while you're driving it. You know, it made them through 91, but you drive that car and it feels like the 50s. It feels like the last 50s car. You got a hood ornament out in front, a lot of steel, chrome all around you. You steer in that wheel, over assisted steering, and you're just kind of slogging through, and it feels so cool. And you put the dog in that car and the kids, and you go to Cape Cod, and that's how it should be. That's how life should be, and it evokes this special time, which is why I think people love it. Okay, next up, here's the most ridiculous car on this list. Used fun cars that are actually practical. The Lamborghini LM002. This was Lamborghini's SUV in the 1980s. It is absurd. They made like 350 of these, I think, something like that. Terrible car, horrible to drive, incredibly unreliable. But how cool is that? The ultimate SUV maybe of all time. Just a ridiculous, over-the-top, absurd vehicle. Countach V12 up front. Giant tires. It could go over anything. It was crazy. And it seats 4. It's got back seats. You can get inside it with your family if you want to subject them to the carbureted fumes that come off of that V12. Truly ridiculous car. Have always loved the LM002. It's a shame they're now like expensive. They're like $300,000 to $400,000, which is a lot, but it's also just so cool. Okay, next up, practical used cars that are fun. Lotus EVORA. Again, like the 612, it's the only 2 cars on this list that are not 4 doors, but the EVORA is more practical than a traditional Lotus sports car. You think about it on a lease, it's a very tight, difficult to get in and out of, tiny cabin, don't really want to use it. The EVORA had 4 seats and a Toyota powertrain, so it was relatively fuel efficient, it was reasonably practical. You wouldn't want to put anybody in the seats, but in more storage space, it was a nice car too, and it was reliable, which adds to the practicality because you can trust it if you take it somewhere. Again, not really a car you could like put kids in or whatever, but it was fun and it was cool and it was more practical than a lot of other sports cars while still retaining the fun to drive. You know, I drive an EVORA and I think to myself, this drive's not that different from these 2-seat mid-engine cars like a Cayman, but you got a little more space and you got a little more reliability. And it seems to me like EVORA values have kind of bottomed out, which only adds to the desirability because you can buy one, they're not that expensive to maintain, and you can sell it in 3 years and not really lose all that much. It's probably worth buying. Okay, next up on my practical, cool, fun used car list, Mercedes-Benz E55 AMG. And I'm not naming a specific generation, there were 2. There was the W210, which was sold from 99 to 02, and then there was the W211, which was sold from 03 to 06. They were both awesome. I owned a W210 E55, and then I owned the next gen E-Class, but the E63 version, which came out in 07. They were both great. The early ones are great because they're like these big block of a car, reliable, fun. They weren't as like athletic as the next one that came out in 03, but they were great cars, like seriously great luxury cars with a lot of practicality and space. They were just fun. The next gen had way more power and kind of more special modern styling, and that was desirable too. And they had excellent reliability. And they made a wagon version, which only added to the appeal. E63 and E55 wagon is obviously a car for this list, but I think the best one, I still think the best one was the first one. So that was like the 05-06 E55 wagon. It had 469 supercharged horsepower, a rear-facing third-row seat, and these were probably the most reliable AMG cars from this era. It was a good, solid powertrain. And I love driving these cars, both that body style and the prior one. Amazing cars, reliable, fun to drive, relatively subtle styling, just damn cool. And they're not that expensive. You can get a W210 E55 for maybe 20 grand for a really nice one. And a W211 is not that much more. Maybe 25 buys you a really nice one. And maybe 40 for a wagon, 40, 45. But that's worth it. And again, cars that aren't really losing value. Okay, next up, fun used practical cars, Mitsubishi DELICA. These are so cool. This is a van that was built by Mitsubishi that was never sold here in the United States, but they did a 4-wheel drive version, and these have been getting imported to the United States in huge numbers because it offers van practicality, but off-road capability. So if you've ever been off-roading and you thought to yourself, hey, I wish I could bring my whole family or all my friends, or I wish I had a bigger vehicle so I could sleep in it and camp, that's the DELICA. It can off-road and keep up with Jeeps, but it has enough space in it where you can camp inside the car. You don't have to set up a tent. Or you can bring your kids and your family and you don't have to have like 2 vehicles or someone waits at the trailhead or one of that. That is cool. And the DELICA has been getting a lot of love. So they're getting imported. They're now 25 years old. DELICAs were sold throughout the 80s into the 90s. A new generation DELICA came out in 94. Those are starting to become legal and they're starting to get imported. And these are all over the Pacific Northwest and southwestern Canada. Incredibly popular cars with sort of the outdoorsy, off-roady culture there. And they're kind of sweeping the country from west to east as they come in from Japan. And so if you want an off-roader that can take the whole family, you want a DELICA. Okay, next up, here is another car that not a lot of people think about, but is a fun, practical used car that you can get. The original Porsche Panamera. So a 2010-11 Panamera S or Panamera Turbo. These are surprisingly affordable. They're like $25,000 to $40,000 used cars, and they are reasonably reliable. Porsche had a golden era of reliability. It kind of still continues, but especially then, like the late 2000s, early 2010s, there were great cars they were making. And those Panameras are reliable. The turbos had 500 horsepower. The S and 4S had 400 horsepower. They were fun, fast, exciting cars. And the real secret about the Panamera is not only is it fast in a straight line, but it handled so well. Even though it was huge, which it was, 7 Series or S-Class sized, they handled well, they were fun to drive, they were exciting cars, and they're now relatively affordable. And I think part of the reason for that is, you know, used cars depreciate, luxury cars depreciate a lot, but people are afraid of German used cars because of reliability. But I don't want to say the Panamera doesn't have that problem, but it has it less than 7 Series and S-Class, and it's a rewarding car to own. The other thing about those Panameras is they were hatchbacks. You know, all these other luxury sedans were sedans. The Panamera was a secret hatchback. And so it was more practical than the other luxury sedans. And it seated, you know, 4 people comfortably. The first gen Panameras didn't have a middle seat and back, so you couldn't get 5, but they seated 4. They were pretty practical. All-wheel drive in the 4S and the turbo. They're great cars, and they deserve more love from people looking for like a fun used family car. So it's on this list. And finally, fun used practical cars. It wouldn't be possible to make this list without mentioning some sort of Toyota SUV. The FJ Cruiser is obvious, the 4Runner is obvious, but I'm gonna go with the Land Cruiser here, in part because I own one. I own a 200 series, which was made from 2008 to 2021. These were fantastic cars. I love them. I love the 5.7 liter V8. It's a fantastic powertrain. My Land Cruiser right now is getting a lot of work done to it to like bulletproof it for the future because I plan to own it for decades to come. I've already had it for a little over a year, and they're great. And one of the interesting things about the Land Cruiser, the 80 series models, which were sold from 91 to 97, they were initially a luxury car and off-roaders didn't want them. Then they depreciated, then everybody wanted one and they cut them up and tore them up. Now they're becoming hot again. The 100 series went through the same deal. Luxury car nobody wanted, then it got cheap and everybody wanted them. The 200 series is just becoming affordable for a lot of off-roaders, and a lot of people are starting to gravitate towards them. I am disappointed that we don't get the newest 300 series Land Cruiser here in North America, but the 200 was an amazing car and a great swan song for the Land Cruiser. They drive really well, they have great luxury and amazing off-road capabilities. That 5.7 V8 was also used in the Tundra, which means that parts are going to be available forever and ever to come. And it's a great car. It's tremendously good at everything except fuel economy. It can hold everybody, take them in crazy off-road situations in comfort, and they're fantastic, reliable, desirable cars. So the Land Cruiser, you can't beat it, except with maybe one of the other cars on this list. So there you go. You can get a fun used car and still have a practical family car all in one if you get one of these.